Welcome, everybody. I think as everybody here knows, today is a very big day. It's Pentecost, it's confirmation, but it is also the day in which we're celebrating 30 years of an amazing ministry of music that Peter Sykes has brought to First Church. That's about all I want to say for now. I have some remarks for in the service. We're also going to be hearing in the service from Kate Laser and Paul Sawyer and Hattie Van Ness, our composer in residence. We will hear some of her pieces today. And from her, there will be some other guests joining us that we'll call up. I want to thank Rob Cooper for capturing this for us all, especially for Peter, so he can hear it later. We need to wrap up by 10 of 10, or 10 of 11, because somebody needs to go and play the prelude. And what we thought we could do is just have sort of an informal conversation, really, centered around sharing some stories. And after just a short opening bit, we're going to invite Peter to share a little bit of background for those of us like me who wasn't here 30 years ago, to hear the story of how it came to be. Kate Judd found some things in our archives, like the actual bulletins from the day of his service when he became acting music minister. On the back of one of them, they're acting, and on the back of another, it says music director. So we can look at those or pass those around. But before we get started, and then we want to open it up and invite all of you to share stories, not just adjectives. We can fill the room with adjectives that will make Peter very uncomfortable, but consider if there's stories you can share as well, because I think that's a even better way to show Peter how we appreciate him.
It's an acrostic poem, which means if you read the first letter of every line down the page, it spells out First Church Choir. First Church Choir for Peter. Filling the sanctuary with sound, we sing in 4 parts a beautiful piece by Schutz. Rising and falling notes weave together, stilling the busy minds of all who hear, till the singers and the listeners are one. Counterpoint and melody, we learn how to make them work, thanks to Peter, ultimate shepherd of our voices, revealing things about the music we'd never contemplate on our own, his gentle wisdom having its effect on every singer's voice, creating a whole out of many parts. How can I keep from singing? This refrain, old song we've heard so often, is what we've learned from him, restoring our faith, keeping us whole. Thank you, Peter.
Well, fortunately, the only person that has to follow that is Peter. So, Peter, why don't you start us off and just give us a little bit of the story of your coming here. We have some pieces in here, and Kate Judd has a short reading. Maybe this could cue it up.
Okay. This is from the 1986 annual report, and it's the Music and Other Arts report, the last paragraph. And it's, but the major loss of this year, and one we will feel for a while, is the fact that Bob Schuneman has had to give up the job of music director, a job he filled extremely well. We have 2 consolations. One, we have Peter Sykes to lead us while we conduct the hunt for a new director.
Well, probably some of you know that I first came through the doors of this church quite a bit before any of that. That it was as an organ student doing the conservatory, and I came to practice on the Frobenius organ because my teacher at the time at the conservatory was Bob Schuneman, who was the music director here at First Church. And so I have on a piece of music a set of directions to 11 Garden Street and how to talk to the secretary, Susan Moran, about getting the key to the sanctuary, because it used to be in those days that the sanctuary door had a chain around it and a padlock, because people couldn't go in during the week. And that was in September of 1976. And so it's been a long time that I've been showing up here. That actually there was a long period that this was where I practiced and this was where I took lessons, but I had no idea of the congregation at all because I had my own church job someplace else. One of the things about organists is that they're only on one place on Sunday morning. You can't go and visit other churches or be anywhere else. You're where you have to be. And so I had 10 years of practicing on the organ here before I ever sort of attended a service or there were a couple of special concerts and services that I accompanied. And so I had some connection with the choir sort of in the late 70s, but that was, and some of you might even remember that, Bob Schöneman's Evensong services. And so that was my first karate. And then Bob came to me and said, I'm going to leave, and would you be the interim? And I said, only if I can be a candidate. I said, if I can't be a candidate, find somebody else. And so they talked about it, someone said, well, we're all adults, you can be the candidate and the interim at the same time. What a bad idea that was. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that it probably sort of sharpened the whole experience for everyone because I felt I was auditioning every second. And also I think the committee felt like they had to look extra hard at other people. I know that there were people flown in, that they had a lot of things, and I remember having a conversation with the colleagues that says, oh, it's not looking good for you, they're having some really high-powered people. And I knew who some of them were, and I have not let them know, of course, that I knew. But it was a moment, you know, of real uncertainty. And I remember very well walking through Harvard Square, just walking around, getting up the courage to lead the choir rehearsal. That it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I had 2 church jobs before that were small, and I hadn't really thought that I would be a church music director, but there you are. And I remember I was sitting and just starting to play the service, and I felt hands on my shoulder. And there was no one there. This is where you are supposed to be.
Wow.
So there. You know, and so I have a lot of remembrances. I'll always remember a particular service in which the very fact of Armistice Day in 1918 was recounted to us by someone who was there, who was 11 years old in 1918, and sort of gave it, you'll remember it was Dr. Dow. Dr. Dow got up and, you know, I mean, with his cane and his beard, and he regaled us, and for once I was happy to hear him go on.
Oh, the stories we can tell.
And he talked about how all the factory whistles blew, and that there was that everyone came out of their houses, and there was an incredible, great celebration of the end of World War I. And I thought, wow, you know, this is living history. This is something, you know, certainly a connection. Of course, when you think that the church is 350 years old to begin with, that's a drop in the bucket. But even so, to feel the connection to a real past is kind of amazing. I was reflecting this morning, actually, that if this job for me, if I were teaching public school instead of being a music director, I would be done. I would be able to retire and have a pension for the rest of my life, and I have friends who have done exactly that. And yet I think, and I thought, you know, they're very happy to be leaving, and yet I thought, you know, I'm just starting, that I don't feel like it's one chapter that's over at all, and that certainly all of the changes and all of the wonderful new people and old people, everyone that it's such a continuum, you know, in a way that it doesn't feel like there's any milestone at all, but just you know, one other Sunday amongst many.
Peter, can I ask you to share what you shared with us at staff meeting about the other anniversary that you've celebrated recently, and the introduce the person sitting to your right in case everybody knows him. I think everybody knows Henry at this point, but.
Well, okay, so this is Henry. What's the angle I want to use? It was May 8th, 2015, right? That I was in New York and I had a dinner date and was with this fellow here. And we had a really nice dinner, and it turned out that I was going down to teach the next weekend. We had another dinner, and so things went on. And so put in your calendars now July 23rd. Saturday, July 23rd. 1 p.m. there will be a wedding here at First Church. On May 9th of this year, I logged on to Facebook, of course, and it told me, 1 year ago you became friends with Henry. Celebrate that friendship, and I thought I could do better. So so anyway, I posted this big thing, and within an hour there were 200 likes, and now we're touching 600, which is pretty good. And so you may know that Henry is a UCC minister and is AWOL today. Well, he's absent with leave.
Well, I'm the boss. So.
But Peter, it's a reminder of all that we've been through together in 30 years, how many changes we've all seen, and
It's true.
and you've had many, and the church has had many, and
Yeah. Henry is right now serving as interim lead pastor of First Congregational Church in Somerville. So you're all allowed to go visit him there once.
not all on the same day.
But even if you can't make it, they post their sermons online on Sunday afternoons that morning. So you can, if you just Google First Church Somerville sermons, you'll be able to hear this guy preach. I think he's pretty good.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Henry, for bringing some new life to Peter as well. So, I want to open it up and invite other stories, reflections, remembrances, celebrations.
Do you remember you were playing for our wedding, and many of you were there singing in the choir, and it was torrential flooding in southern New England that day. And we lost power during communion, and we had chosen a very big postlude for you to play. I don't remember what it was. Wendy had chosen it, but the power went out and you had to play it. We were so looking forward to it on a pipe organ, and you went to the piano and played on the piano, and the Harold, who was serving as the organist at the church Wendy was serving at Melrose, he went to the piano bench and turned your pages for you, and it was a nice memory for us. We were able to pull it off.
Oh,
Jim?
We've had the sort of sad privilege to lay to rest homeless folks who've come through First Church Shelter and or who died on the street. And Peter's always finds a student or a colleague to do it for us. And if he's available, he's like, I'm there. And so you're a hell of a musician, but you're a even better Christian. Thank you.
Please, Buzz. And then Ruth.
I grew up in Harvard Congregational Church in Brookline, where I think the choir has performed a few times. And it was marvelous to have the music of E. Power Biggs there. And now in my later years, I couldn't be happier to have the fabulous music of Peter Sykes. Thank you, Peter, and God bless.
I think Bill and I predated everyone in this room, hearing Peter Sykes on Cape Cod, and the minister of the Harwich Congregational Church, Al Ronander, brought us together, and one day we even had lunch with your father, and I always remember that. One more story from Edie Howe, who sang in your choir. After her first few choir practices, she told me, she said, you know, Peter Sykes is not only a musician, he is so good in enriching our spiritual life. She really appreciated your deep spiritual reserve.
That brass quartet in 1986, I'm pretty sure included Robin, trumpeter. And that was probably one of the first time, maybe the first time he played with Peter. And always after that, Robin played more and more frequently. And he always said he would rather play with Peter than any other organist because he always knew it'll be fine.
I've only been here a year, and so I wasn't really going to say much, but you know, certainly the music drew me into the community, and I love the fact that the whole congregation stays for the concluding organ piece while every other church in the nation is walking out. And what strikes me though, connecting to 1986, I was a senior at Tulane, and I took a music appreciation course that year. And the professor was lamenting that churches aren't committed to exceptional music. And certainly we have exceptional music.
I give a kind of silly story. I don't quite have the same long history with Peter Sykes that a lot of you do, but like growing up in the church, I was always a little bit intimidated by Peter. You know, like he was this, you know, big serious musician and organist, and you know, and I didn't really find him that approachable. But but a year and a half ago, I was doing this scavenger hunt with friends of mine, and one of the things on the list was get a recording of someone playing an organ in a sock monkey hat, playing an organ rendition of "Carry On My Wayward Son." And I was like, where the hell am I going to find someone willing to do something so silly, to make something so stupid? And so I was like, you should probably ask Peter. I'm like, Peter, do that? And so I sent him an email, and then I have a recording of him at church playing "Carry On My Wayward Son" in the sock monkey, and I'm like, oh my god. Peter is so silly. He's willing to make himself extremely stupid in front of everyone. And that was the greatest thing to me. I still have that recording. I'll post it on Facebook. I can
Peter, your mom told you have a story about being little with your brother Mark in the pram, and you were singing, and she bent down. She was a music teacher, I think, and she bent down to listen to you, and you were singing in parts.
I don't actually remember that.
You don't remember? You told that story.
I had a landlady in Watertown, Angie Lee, whose father was Bodke, who actually started the Longy early music program. But Peter used to come to that house as a boy to study with Angie's husband because he would, to help him to learn how to build harpsichords. Ken used to go into the Museum of Fine Arts and talk with the rare instrument people and bring home plans and draw them up. He was an MIT engineer. And then and then you would come to the house?
He made sort of X-ray plans of antique instruments and then sold them as plans that you could then make your own copy. And I wasn't a little boy, I was 16. But I was, by that time, rapidly interested in the harpsichord and bought the plans for his virginal instrument. And I made it from scratch, from a piece of wood that I got, and I still have pictures of it. And it was a nice instrument in some ways, but it was, well, that instrument, I sold it to a friend and then I lost track of it. And I got an email about 5 years ago from someone saying, do you realize that one of your instruments is for sale on eBay? And I thought, oh God, which one? And so I looked and it was that. And the descriptions, you know, saying that it was made by Wisconsin harpsichord builder Peter Sykes. And and that it was a fairly close copy of the original, but that the workmanship was rustic. These little boxes, we can send the seller a message. And I said, well, thank you, I'm from Massachusetts, not Wisconsin, and the reason it was rustic is because I was 16 years old. I got a message back saying, oh, my gosh, I thought you were dead. And would you like to buy it back? And I said, no, I've moved on. I hope it finds a nice home.
Peter, of course, was awarded the Bodke Prize from Longy for his stellar service. I've had a number of early interactions with Peter. One was our mothers died in the same year, and Peter was a very sensitive counselor when he played for my mother's funeral. And Chris and I were married the year before. And our musical tastes were less sophisticated than after many years of tutelage under Peter. Not that we would have done this, but he warned us about Paco Bell's Canon and the Masterpiece Theater as a common option, and there are other choices.
David? Yeah, speaking of Peter and different musical choices, when we had the musicals, which we should revive, of course, and we had the Swinging Sextons, our own house band with Craig Ball. Peter was drafted to play... dragged to play jazz piano, and there he was. I was totally blown away. I believe it was transcriptions of Fats Waller that you were sight reading. And he's doing things. But other instruments he's played on, he happened to mention when I was in the choir, he was going to be playing at the Methuen organ. Remember that? And you've probably done it more of the times, but you see this organ, you walk into a room and it's an entire cathedral. It's the organ at the end, it was custom built. No, it was the one that was moved from the Boston Symphony to a building custom made for it. And there's this tiny little person, it's like a cartoon, in front of this massive thing, and Peter fills the room. And then I think people should get on, do you have a website? When do we know when you're doing recitals? Because I have to... Yeah, okay, that's what it is, because I mentioned, the new organ at Harvard Chapel. Peter, when are you going to give a recital? And he did, and it was just amazing, but we should all know about these.
And I said, what does it mean? And he said, well, in the trade, that's code for, that didn't suck.
I wanted to say I've been thankful for Peter's kindness on many, many occasions, and just thank you for that. But also really just to say how much fun, educational fun rehearsals are. If a composer who's new to us has studied with somebody that we do know, it just teach us a little bit, and at least personally, it makes me feel like a really valued musician here.
When my daughter was married at Habitat, Peter graciously agreed to play. She requested the music and illiterate music me. I cannot, the music from that movie about the pig. Babe, that's it. And so she wanted that played, and doesn't Peter, plow through whatever he needs to plow through and come up with something that he can play on the harpsichord, and it was so generous.
I have stories about people asking things for weddings. There were two that I almost remember. One was that they wanted as their recessional the Battle Hymn of the Republic. That may be appropriate. And then in the 70s, there was this song called Having My Baby. I remember a wedding where the soloist came and she said, well, I'm going to sing thus and so, and I said, well, do you have music? Well, she said, music? And she said, no, I'll just sing it, you'll figure out how it goes. It was a song I'd never heard before. And I said, do you know how the accompaniment goes? She said, yeah, it goes do-do-do-do-do. I thought, okay, I'm up for this challenge. She started to sing and I started to write down the notes and I could figure out what I did it, I figured it out.
Wow.
I thought, this is why I went to music school. So I can accompany this wedding soloist doing this piece, that was, it was kind of a bluesy number, I'll remember. They come to go do-do-do-do when I walk down the aisle with my hand in yours.
So are we gonna have that on July 23rd?
No.
I appreciate so many aspects of Peter and his playing and his musicality and his graciousness and his spirituality. But I love his hymn playing. I mean, there is a steady pulse. He supports your singing. You want to rise up to the occasion. He listens to the text and he modulates the buttons and the pulls and whatever, to appropriately. I love it.
And she marched up to the console and looked me up and said, "Young man." And she said, and she was schooling me on hymn playing, she said, between verses, or between lines of the hymn, I need to breathe. And between verses of the hymn, I need to swallow. And I thought, that's good. I'll do that. Oh, that'll be fine, and I thought that was really good advice, and I use it when I'm teaching, think of how much time it takes to breathe, think of how much time it takes to swallow, and that's what you should do. And so then a couple of weeks later, for the postlude, which I should say that we employ an antique custom at this church by calling that the voluntary. Because that's a term that was used liturgically for something that was not required to be part of the service. But it was something that was added as a trope at the beginning or the end, or sometimes in the middle. A voluntary is just something, could be spoken, but it's something that's not required. One of our seminarians said, well, if everyone sits and has to listen, shouldn't we call it the mandatory? But I used to, and sometimes, I play some pieces that are more modern and dissonant. And so I played a few Sundays after that first one, something that was really crashy and loud and quite dissonant. And Ruth came up to the console again, and I thought, oh, here it comes. And she said, I want to thank you for playing that. I've always liked Hindemith. I'm in the right place. Only in Cambridge.
Peter, tell us about the closing voluntary for today.
The closing voluntary today is a fugue. Well, there are three stories to tell about it. First, it's a hard piece and it's showy, and so don't clap. But it is one of the pieces that I played as my audition for the job grant. And so I've been playing that piece for over 30 years, and it's a piece. And I remember, having this feeling as I was sitting down to play, I hope they understand, that what I hold dear in organ playing is going to make an impression. And I thought, no, just keep going. It's going to be something. But it is a piece that was written by Bach as the audition for a church job. And in those days, what the church did was they gave him the fugue subject and two counter subjects and said, now you write a fugue, and whether you get the job depends on how well it comes out. So not only do you have to play the thing, but you had to have written it. And let's just say that Bach's outcome was different than mine. That he did not get the job.
Oh my God.
He did not get the job, and it came out later that the person that did so because he agreed to a kickback scheme. And so it was said later of the guy that got the job that he played better with his dollars than his fingers. So So that piece, it's a famous piece, the G minor fugue. In one of the manuscripts of it, it says, in this piece, one is obliged to kick one's feet around quite a bit. Because it's got a very involved pedal part.
Beautiful. So, I think it's time to let Peter catch his breath and swallow before he has to go and play the opening voluntary. Thank you all so much. This is to be continued. We're going to carry this celebration through our service, and after in Margaret Jewett Hall as well. There are some more surprises coming. So, but a special thanks to Peter for sharing some really beautiful stories about your time here. Thank you.
Forgot that story, huh? This is why you have me, I guess, to remind you of these happy little childhood memories.
Yes, both of them.
Right. You did tell me about your wedding. You said, remember, July 23rd, and I thought, oh goody, Henry and Peter are coming to Maine. And so I wrote it. Henry and Peter are coming to Maine. And then you were going to stay overnight.
Okay.
So you found something better to do.